The morning began quiet on the ranch. The kind of quiet that made a person believe the whole world was still asleep. Soft light stretched over the wide land, touching the grass, the barns, and the fences with a warm glow. Elena liked this kind of morning. She always felt calm when she walked out early, hearing nothing but the sound of horses breathing and the distant whistle of wind. She had only been working on the ranch for a few months, but every day felt like she was learning something new. That day, she started her chores early because there was a storm last night. And storms always caused problems. Fences broke. Gates got loose. Tools went missing. Animals wandered to places they shouldn't. She walked along the fence line, checking for damage. Her boots were still wet from the damp ground, and the sky had a soft gray color that warned more rain might come later. She reached a section of the fence that looked slightly bent. At first, she thought she could fix it by tightening the wooden plank, but when she touched it, she realized a part of it had cracked. Wood from old fences could break easily, and this part seemed weak for weeks now. Elena kneeled down and tried to lift the broken piece so she could pull the old nails out. She wasn't completely confident about repairing fences, but she wanted to try. She liked learning new tasks, and she didn't want the ranch owner, Daniel, to think she couldn't handle simple work. She held the plank with one hand and tried to pull a nail with the other. At first, it didn't move at all. Then, suddenly, the wood snapped. A sharp, thin metal splinter shot straight into her palm. It happened so fast, she didn't even have time to pull her hand away. She felt a sudden, deep sting, followed by a wave of hot pain. She gasped and dropped the plank, clutching her hand tight. Her first instinct was to shake her hand as if that would loosen the splinter. It didn't. She tried to breathe slowly, but the pain spread more and more. When she looked at her palm, her eyes widened. The splinter was long, thin, and buried deep. Only a tiny part of it stuck out. She knew it wasn't something she could pull out easily. She tried not to panic, but her heartbeat rose quickly. Sweat formed on her forehead even though the morning air was cool. She looked around, thinking she should call someone. The ranch was large, and most workers were scattered in different areas. But Daniel was usually nearby, working early, just like she was. He was the kind of man who started his day before sunrise and didn't stop until the stars came out. He always said, a ranch only survived when people took care of it before problems started. Elena tried taking one step, then another, but her hand throbbed with every heartbeat. She clenched her jaw and kept walking, hoping Daniel would appear like he always did. And right when she felt her vision blur from the pain, she heard footsteps behind her. Elena? You okay? Daniel's voice was steady, deep, and calm, like the land itself. She turned around quickly, trying not to look weak, but her face said everything. Daniel's eyes immediately dropped to her hand. He saw the splinter and stepped closer in seconds. He didn't waste time asking useless questions. Instead, he gently took her wrist and held her hand still so she wouldn't move it. That's deep, he said, his voice low but not frightening. You can't leave it like this. Come on. We need to clean it before it gets worse. Elena swallowed hard and nodded. She trusted him, but the pain made her afraid. She didn't want to move her hand more than she had to. Still, she let him guide her toward the ranch house. His steps were steady, and his grip was careful, as if he knew exactly how much pressure to apply so he wouldn't make things worse. They walked into the small first aid room Daniel had set up inside the ranch house. It wasn't fancy, but it was organized. Shelves lined the walls with bandages, ointments, clean tools, and bottles labeled neatly. Daniel had always said that a ranch wasn't just about animals, you had to take care of the people who worked there too. He pulled a stool close to the table and motioned for her to sit. Elena sat slowly, holding her hand close to her chest. Her eyes stayed fixed on the splinter. The sight of it made her stomach twist. Daniel washed his hands, put on clean gloves, and grabbed a small tool that looked like a thin plastic tube with a soft tip. Elena had never seen it before. She watched him prepare it, with growing concern. Then he said calmly, "Before I take the splinter out, I need to clean the wound. I'll have to put this inside the cut." Her eyes widened instantly. The words came out of her mouth before she could think. "Wait, you're putting that inside me?" Daniel paused. For a moment, he looked confused. Then he blinked, realized what she meant, and a small smile appeared on his face, not mocking, just warm. "Inside the wound," he clarified gently. "It's just a soft irrigator. It cleans out dirt, so your hand doesn't get infected. It won't hurt more than it already does." Elena felt her face heat with embarrassment. She looked away, feeling foolish for misunderstanding. But Daniel didn't tease her, and that made her feel a little better. He moved closer, his tone turning serious again. "It might sting, but I'll be quick. I promise." She nodded slowly, trusting him. Daniel always spoke in a way that made people believe him, not because he tried to sound strong, but because he never pretended or exaggerated. His honesty was simple and steady, like everything else about him. He held her wrist gently but firmly so she wouldn't pull away. Then he cleaned the area around the splinter. Elena clenched her teeth. One, trying not to flinch. Daniel kept talking softly, telling her to breathe, reminding her that it would all be over soon. His voice felt grounding, like someone holding a lantern in the dark. When he finally removed the splinter, Elena felt a sharp jolt. But Daniel worked so quickly and carefully that the pain faded faster than she expected. He cleaned the wound, added ointment, and wrapped it with a bandage that felt cool and soothing. "You did good," he said quietly when he finished. Elena let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. "Thank you. I thought it would be worse." "It would have been if we didn't fix it right away." He gathered the tools and cleaned the table. "Next time you see a cracked fence like that, call me before touching it. Old wood can be sneaky." Elena smiled weakly, feeling both relieved and exhausted. She admired how calm he stayed through the whole thing. The ranch might have been big, and the work might have been tough, but moments like this reminded her that she wasn't alone here. Daniel wasn't just a boss, he was someone who cared. As she stood up to leave, Daniel gently touched her arm to stop her. "You're not doing any heavy work today. Come back here later, so I can check the bandage." She nodded, feeling grateful for his care. As she stepped outside, she looked back once more. Daniel was washing his hands again, focused and serious, just like always. But Elena couldn't forget how calm he had been, or how he reassured her when she was panicking. The pain in her hand might fade soon, but the memory of his kindness settled deep inside her heart, warm and steady, like the morning sun spreading across the ranch. Elena returned to work later that afternoon, but her hand hurt more than she expected. Every time she tried to hold something or lift a small bucket, a dull ache ran up her arm. She did not want Daniel to think she was weak, so she kept trying to do simple chores. But after a few minutes, she realized she was only making the pain worse. Her bandage was getting loose too. She sighed and decided she had no choice but to go back to the first aid room like Daniel told her. As she walked back toward the ranch house, she felt nervous. She didn't know why. Maybe she felt embarrassed about earlier, especially about the sentence she blurted out without thinking. She could still hear her own voice in her head, and she pressed her lips together, hoping Daniel wasn't going to bring it up or tease her. She knew he wasn't that type of man, but the thought still stuck with her. When she reached the house, the door was open. She stepped inside and found him sitting at the table, repairing a leather saddle strap with calm, practiced hands. His hat sat on the back of the chair, and his sleeves were rolled up, showing the strong forearms of someone who spent his whole life working under the sun. Elena cleared her throat softly. Daniel looked up immediately. "Hand bothering you?" She nodded, lifting it slightly. He didn't look annoyed or surprised. Instead, he set the saddle strap aside and stood up right away. "Come on," he said gently. "Let's take a look." Elena followed him into the small first aid room again. The room felt different this time. Maybe because she wasn't panicking. Maybe because she knew Daniel would take care of things in that calm, steady way of his. She sat on the same stool as earlier, resting her injured hand on her lap. Daniel pulled on a fresh pair of gloves and crouched down slightly so he could see her hand better. "Does it hurt more now than before?" "A little," she admitted. He nodded. "You've probably been using it too much. You need to give it time." He unwound the bandage slowly and carefully. Elena winced when he touched a tender spot, and he immediately apologized. "Sorry, I'll be gentle." His voice was soft, and for a moment, she forgot about the pain completely. Daniel examined the wound with focused eyes, checking for redness or swelling. She could tell he took things like this seriously. It wasn't just a job for him. Keeping people safe was something he took to heart. "It looks clean," he finally said. "No signs of infection. But you need another rinse." Elena's heart jumped a little when he picked up the same soft-tip irrigator from earlier. The memory of her embarrassing words flashed again. She swallowed hard and stared at the floor. Daniel noticed her expression. "You okay?" he asked. "Yes," she said quickly, but her voice cracked slightly. Daniel paused and raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" he asked. And this time, his tone was gentler, almost teasing, but without the teasing. Elena gave in. "I just said something silly earlier." Daniel understood immediately. A slow smile formed on his face, not a mocking one, not a loud laugh, just a warm, amused smile. "You were scared," he said. "Anyone would have panicked a little." "I still shouldn't have said it like that," she mumbled. He shook his head. "It happens." Then he added quietly, "And for the record, I've heard much stranger things during first aid work." She actually laughed at that. The tension in her shoulders loosened, and Daniel seemed happy to see her ease up. He stepped closer again, holding her wrist gently. "This won't take long," he said. "Just breathe in and out." She followed his instructions. Daniel cleaned the wound again, with slow, careful movements. The rinse stung, but only for a moment. He kept talking in a calm voice, distracting her by asking how long she had been on the ranch now, what kind of work she liked most, and what she wanted to learn next. She answered between small breaths, and the conversation helped the pain fade into the background. When he finished cleaning, he applied fresh ointment and wrapped her hand in a new bandage. His fingers were steady, and the way he wrapped the cloth showed years of practice. Elena watched him quietly, noticing small things she hadn't seen before: the slight wrinkle near his eyes when he focused, the gentle way he tied the final knot, and the way his expression softened whenever she winced. "There," he said when he finished. "You should be better now. But seriously, no heavy work for the rest of the day." She sighed. "But I want to help. I don't want to fall behind." Daniel leaned back slightly and rested his hands on his hips. "You're not falling behind. You hurt your hand. That's enough reason to rest." He leaned in a little closer and added, "A ranch is not a competition, Elena. It's a home, and you don't rush a home." She stared at him for a moment. That was not something she expected to hear. Most work bosses she knew in her life just cared about the job, the tasks, the time. But Daniel, he cared about her well-being. It made her chest feel warm in a strange way, and she looked away quickly before he noticed. "Okay," she said softly. Daniel nodded, seeming satisfied. "Good. Why don't you sit outside for a while? Get some fresh air. You look tired." She nodded again and stepped outside onto the porch. The air smelled like rain and wet soil. She sat on the wooden steps, letting the breeze cool her face. For a long moment, she simply breathed, feeling the tension leave her body. After a few minutes, Daniel came out and sat beside her. Not too close, not too far, just enough to show that he didn't want her to feel alone. He handed her a cool glass of water. "You did really well today," he said after a moment of silence. "I didn't feel like I did," she replied. "You stayed calm. You didn't make anything worse. And you came to get help when you needed it. That's smart, not weak." She looked down at her boots, feeling something inside her shift. She wasn't used to being praised for small things. She wasn't used to gentle encouragement either. "Thank you," she said quietly. Daniel glanced at her hand again. "I'll check it once more before sunset, just to be safe." Elena nodded, touched by how much effort he was putting into taking care of her. She began telling him stories about her old town. How she grew up helping her mother with small chores. How she always wanted to work outdoors, instead of sitting in one place. Daniel listened without interrupting, occasionally asking small questions that showed he was paying attention. Then he told her a little about himself, how he took over the ranch after his father passed away, how he learned every skill the hard way, how he made mistakes but kept going. Elena didn't know why, but hearing him speak made her feel closer to him, as if he wasn't just her employer but someone she could trust deeply. As the day slowly passed, clouds began to gather again. The smell of rain grew stronger. Daniel looked up at the sky. "We might get another storm tonight," he said. "Good thing you're not doing fence work today." Elena laughed softly. "I think I've had enough fences for a while." He smiled at that. The evening light grew soft and golden. Birds flew low, and the horses in the field made quiet sounds as they settled. Elena felt a strange sense of peace sitting beside him. She didn't know why, but she didn't want this moment to end. Before Daniel stood up, he said, "If your hand hurts again, don't wait. Come find me." "I will," she promised. He nodded and walked back toward the barn to finish his chores. Elena watched him for a moment, noticing how steady he looked, how dependable. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew one thing clearly. Daniel was someone she could trust completely. And for the first time in a long time, she felt safe. The next few days settled into a quiet rhythm, a different kind of routine for Elena. Instead of doing heavy chores, she spent more time helping with lighter tasks, sorting tools, brushing horses, checking feed buckets, and keeping the barns tidy. Her hand still ached, but the pain slowly eased, and every morning, Daniel inspected the bandage with the same calm focus he had shown on the first day. He always asked the same question in the same gentle voice. "Does it hurt today?" And she always answered honestly, because lying to him felt pointless. He cared too much to accept anything else. Every time Daniel cleaned the wound, he worked slowly, with careful hands, and spoke to her softly so she wouldn't feel nervous. Elena found herself looking forward to those moments, more than she wanted to admit. She liked how he remembered the things she told him, how he gave thoughtful answers, and how he listened with patience she rarely saw in people. On the fourth morning, she walked into the barn, carrying a small sack of oats. She used her left hand to hold it, while her injured right hand stayed close to her chest. Daniel was already inside, brushing down one of the horses. The horse stood calmly, enjoying the care. Elena watched the scene for a moment, feeling a small warmth inside her chest. Daniel always looked natural around animals, quiet, steady, kind. When he noticed her, he set the brush aside. "You're not supposed to carry anything heavy," he reminded. "It's not heavy," she replied quickly. He raised an eyebrow, knowing she was stretching the truth. But instead of scolding her, he stepped closer and took the sack from her gently. "You're healing. Don't rush it." Elena smiled a little. "I'm trying." "I know you are," he said, and the sincerity in his voice made her heart flutter unexpectedly. The morning passed with them working in the same area. Elena swept the barn floor while Daniel checked the horse stalls. They didn't talk constantly, but their silence was never awkward. Every now and then, Daniel asked her a small question: how she slept, if her hand felt stiff, what job she wanted to learn next when she healed. She answered each one lightly, noticing how he seemed to care not only about her injury, but about her comfort, her thoughts, even her feelings. Later in the day, Daniel asked her to sit on a wooden stool by the open barn door so he could check her bandage. The sunlight fell across her face, warm and soft. He knelt in front of her and began unwinding the cloth. His fingers were gentle but firm, and Elena felt a small wave of nervousness, not because of pain, but because of how close he was. She could smell the faint scent of leather and hay on his clothes, the scent of the ranch itself. "This looks much better," he said after inspecting the wound. "You're healing fast." Elena felt a little proud. "So, I can do more work now?" Daniel smiled lightly. "You always want to rush back, don't you?" "I don't like sitting around," she admitted. "I know," he said. "But I also know you push yourself too hard. I don't want to disappoint you." Daniel paused in the middle of tying the new bandage. His eyes lifted to hers, serious and soft at the same time. "Elena," he said quietly, "you don't have to prove anything to me." The words made her breath catch. She stared at him, unsure how to respond. No one had ever said something like that to her before. People in her life usually expected her to work without complaint, to stay strong even when she felt tired or hurt. But Daniel, he understood her differently. He finished tying the bandage carefully, then let her hand rest gently on her lap. He didn't pull away immediately. Instead, he waited until she nodded that she was okay. "You don't disappoint me," he said again, softer this time. "Not ever." For a moment, neither of them moved. Elena felt her heart racing in a slow, steady beat. She wasn't sure why she felt this way around him. Maybe it was because he always looked at her with sincerity. Maybe it was the safety she felt, something she hadn't felt in many years. She finally looked away, her cheeks warm. "Thank you," she whispered. Daniel stood up, clearing his throat lightly. "Let's get some lunch," he said. "You need a break." F. 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 They walked toward the ranch house together. Inside, Daniel heated up leftover stew, while Elena sliced bread using her left hand. They talked casually about the weather, about the horses, about how much rain the ranch might get next week. The conversation felt comfortable, almost like they had known each other much longer than a few months. After lunch, they stepped outside again. The sky was bright blue, with long strokes of white clouds stretching across it. The ranch looked alive, the wind moving through the fields, chickens wandering near the meadow, horses trotting quietly in the distance. Daniel leaned against the railing of the porch, folding his arms. "You know," he said, "you're doing well here. Not just with the work. You fit in." Elena looked up at him. "Really," he said firmly, "you bring something good to this place." The compliment made her chest feel warm once again. She looked at the horses rather than at him, afraid he might see her smile too clearly. Later that afternoon, Daniel asked her to help brush one of the younger horses. "You can use your good hand," he said, "and the horse will enjoy the company. Thank you for watching. And see the scenics danced. Where and scenics video, and the horse will enjoy the company." Elena loved being around the animals, so she agreed right away. As she brushed the horse's soft coat, Daniel stood beside her, fixing a loose rope on the stall door. They worked quietly until Daniel glanced over at her. "You're good with them," he said. "I just try to be gentle," she replied. "That's why you're good with them." She didn't know why, but hearing that simple praise made her heart flutter again. She looked down, continuing to brush the horse, to hide the small smile on her lips. As the day went on, she noticed something changing not around her, but inside her. She wasn't sure what it was at first. Maybe it was the way Daniel always checked on her. Maybe it was how carefully he cleaned her wound every single day. Or maybe it was how he listened, not just with his ears, but with his full attention. Whatever it was, she felt something strong forming between them, something she didn't know how to describe. That evening, after the chores were finished and the animals settled, Daniel asked her to come back to the first aid room for a final check. She sat on the same stool once again while he knelt in front of her, just like the first day. He unwound the bandage, checked the wound, and nodded approvingly. "You'll be back to full strength soon," he said. She smiled softly. "Thanks to you." Daniel looked up at her, his eyes serious. "No," he said. "Thanks to you. You're strong. You healed well, because you take care of yourself. I just helped a little." Elena felt her heart tighten not with pain, but with something warm and sweet. She didn't know how to answer him, so she simply held his gaze for a moment longer than she expected. Then Daniel stood and washed his hands again. When he turned back, he leaned on the counter and crossed his arms lightly. "You know," he said, "you don't have to be afraid to ask me for help. You can come to me for anything. Not just injuries." "Anything?" she repeated quietly. "Anything," he confirmed. The word hung in the air between them. It felt important, heavier than a simple offer. Elena understood what he meant, not in a rushed or improper way, but in the kind of way that said he cared, that he valued her, that she mattered to him. She nodded slowly. "Okay," she whispered. "I will." Daniel gave a small smile, one that reached his eyes. It was a warm smile, the kind that made Elena feel steady inside. They stepped out of the room together and walked toward the barn to close things down for the night. The sun was setting, painting the sky in soft colors: orange, pink, gold. Elena walked beside him quietly, feeling the gentle glow of the moment. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew one thing clearly now. She trusted Daniel with her whole heart. And he was slowly, quietly becoming someone very important in her life. The next morning began quietly, with soft sunlight stretching across the fields. Elena stepped outside the small worker's house where she stayed, breathing in the cool air. Her hand still felt a little stiff, but the sharp pain was gone. She opened and closed her fingers slowly and smiled to herself. Today felt different, though she wasn't sure why. Something warm rested in her chest, a feeling that had grown stronger since the accident, and she knew exactly who caused it. She walked toward the barn, expecting to find Daniel already working. He was always the first to start the day, but as she approached, she saw him standing by the fence, staring thoughtfully across the land. His hat rested low on his head, and his hands were in his pockets. There was a peaceful stillness around him. When he heard her steps, he turned and gave a small nod. "Morning." "Morning," she replied softly. He studied her hand. "How does it feel today?" "Much better," she said. "Almost normal." "That's good." He motioned for her to come closer. "Let me check one last time. After this, I think we're done with bandages." Elena stood close to him while he gently held her hand. His fingers were warm, steady, familiar by now. He examined the skin carefully. The wound had closed nicely, leaving only a faint mark. He lightly pressed around the area, making sure it wasn't tender. "You healed well," he said, releasing her hand. "You can go back to normal work today. Just be smart about it." Elena nodded, unable to stop herself from smiling. "Thank you for taking care of me." Daniel looked at her for a long, quiet second, longer than he usually did. "You're part of this ranch," he said softly. "Of course I took care of you." "Love." She felt the warmth in her chest grow. She didn't know how to respond, so she simply smiled and looked at the horses grazing nearby. The morning passed easily. Elena went back to her usual tasks, feeding animals, checking water troughs, helping tidy the barn. She took her time, careful not to strain her hand. Daniel worked nearby for most of the day. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they simply worked in comfortable silence. But every time she glanced his way, he was already glancing at her, as though making sure she was fine without saying it out loud. Around noon, dark clouds started gathering across the sky again. The air grew thick and warm. Elena looked up at the clouds and sighed. Another storm? Looks like it, Daniel said. Let's finish things early. They moved faster, securing loose gates, covering equipment, checking that the animals were sheltered. A soft rumble echoed far away, warning them more rain was coming. Elena rushed to gather buckets inside the barn, but she stumbled when her foot caught on a small uneven board. Before she could fall, Daniel caught her gently by the arm. His grip was firm, steady just like the day he helped her with her hand. Elena froze for a moment, her heart racing. "You okay?" he asked, concern instantly filling his voice. "Yes," she whispered, though her heart beat wildly. "Just lost my balance." He held her a second longer than necessary, making sure she was steady before letting go. A strange silence fell between them, not uncomfortable, but deep, as if both were suddenly aware of how close they were standing. Elena looked away, feeling her cheeks warm. Daniel cleared his throat softly and stepped back. "Let's head inside. Storm's coming quicker than I thought." Roan. They walked together toward the ranch house as the wind began to pick up. The first drops of rain hit the ground by the time they reached the porch. Inside, Daniel lit a small lamp and closed the windows. The room felt cozy and safe as the storm outside grew louder. Elena sat at the table, brushing the rain from her sleeves. Daniel moved toward the stove and started heating water for tea. He wasn't a man who talked much, but he always made sure people were warm and comfortable during storms. She watched him quietly, feeling something inside her shift again. He didn't know how gentle he really was. He didn't know how his small actions made people feel safe. When he placed a warm cup in front of her, she smiled softly. "Thank you." He sat across from her, his hands wrapped around his own cup. The storm outside grew louder, the wind pushing against the windows. Inside, though, everything felt calm. "You know," Daniel said after a moment, "I'm glad you're here." Elena blinked, surprised. "On the ranch?" "No," he said quietly. "Here, sitting here." Her heart skipped. She didn't speak immediately. Instead, she studied his face. Daniel rarely expressed emotions openly. He spoke through actions, through quiet gestures, through steady presence. But now he looked at her with eyes that held something deeper. "Daniel," she said softly, "you've done a lot for me these past days. More than I expected." You needed help," he said simply. "It was more than just help," she whispered. He looked down, rubbing his thumb along the cup's handle. "I care about the people here." "I know," she said. "But you cared. Differently. With me." The room grew quiet. The storm outside rumbled again, but inside, she felt the silence settle gently like a blanket. Daniel finally spoke, his voice lower. "You matter, Elena." Her breath caught. No one had said those words to her in years. "You matter to me," he continued. "Not because you work hard or because you're part of the ranch, but because—" He paused, searching for the right words. "Because I see who you are, strong, kind, brave, and I respect you." Her eyes softened. "And I feel safe with you. More than I expected." Daniel looked at her with quiet surprise, as if he didn't realize she felt that way too. The storm outside softened into a gentle rain. Their voices grew quieter, almost carried by the soft rhythm of the falling droplets. Elena took a slow breath. "I was scared when I hurt my hand. Not just because it hurt, but because I didn't know if I could trust anyone to help me. But you You didn't even hesitate. Daniel nodded slowly. When someone's hurting, you don't wait. You act. And you stayed calm the whole time, she said. Even when I panicked. He smiled faintly. You did panic a little. I know, she said, finally laughing softly. The tension broke, replaced by warmth. Daniel leaned back in his chair, watching her with eyes filled with something gentle, something protective. You healed well, he said. You're strong. I had help, she replied. For a long moment, they simply sat together, listening to the rain. The room felt warmer than before. Not because of the lamp or the tea, but because of something growing quietly between them. Trust. Gratitude. Connection. Daniel finally spoke again, his voice thoughtful. Whenever you need help, Elena, with anything, you can come to me. I mean that. She nodded. I know, and I will. He looked relieved, as if he had been holding those words inside for days. As the storm slowly faded into silence, Daniel stood and walked to the porch. Elena followed him. Together, they watched the last drops fall from the roof, creating tiny circles in the puddles below. The air smelled fresh. The sky slowly brightened. The ranch looked peaceful again. Daniel glanced at her, his voice soft. Your hand's healed, but I hope you'll still come talk to me sometimes, even without a reason. Elena smiled, a warm, honest smile that came from deep inside her heart. I will, she said. I want to. Daniel nodded, his expression gentle, almost relieved. They stood together on the porch, the ranch stretching endlessly before them. It didn't matter that the storm had come and gone. What mattered was the quiet bond that had formed between them, steady, simple, and genuine. A bond born from care, strengthened by trust, and held together by the peaceful, honest life they shared on the ranch.